Water, the most essential resource for sustaining life anywhere on our planet. In a dry climate, like southern Arizona, communities thrive where it is most abundant. Water supplies here rely on an intricate system of streams and channels, which can remain dry for most of the year. In order to ensure that water remains available everywhere it is needed, a careful understanding of this system is required. In the case of the southwestern United States, much of this research is performed by the Southwest Watershed Research Center, located in Tucson, Arizona. For over 60 years, scientists here have conducted extensive research on regional watersheds in order to preserve the intricate water and soil interactions which support life all over the Southwest. This video explores some of the ongoing research conducted at the Southwest Watershed Research Center and provides a perspective on the historic and global importance of watershed research. A watershed is an important concept for any hydrologic research. It describes any area of land that drains water to the same source.
All the land that we have in the earth, all the dry land, is located in a watershed. So there's nothing mysterious about what a watershed is. Basically, a watershed is a unit of area of land that is drained by a single river or a stream. For example, here we're located in the Walnut Gulch Experimental Watershed. It's drained all by this channel that we're standing in. The 36 square miles that's upstream from us here is all draining to this particular point.
What's really important for watersheds is that they unite society. Surface water flows, lands in the mountains, flows down rivers, then is used in the cities, so it links rural communities with urban communities. It links a number of different land uses. Water is the universal solvent, so it can carry a lot of pollutants with it, and it determines all kinds of ecological benefits along the riparian channels, but animals and plants obviously all need water. So watersheds are a very integrating and natural unit of study and of management.
In 1953, the USDA established the flagship site for the Southwest Watershed Research Center in Walnut Gulch, a 58 square mile watershed surrounding Tombstone, Arizona. With over 60 years now of data, the site has an invaluable record of measurements and provides important information about how a watershed can change over time.
Long-term research is key, so having this history of 60 years of observations on the Walnut Gulch Experimental Watershed allows us to look at things as we see them now. Is there something in the past? Is this something that we've seen in the 60s or 70s, or is this something new? We can look at the trends through time, and it will help us anticipate where we need to be in the future.
Today, Walnut Gulch is blanketed with a complex network of measuring devices, which allow researchers to track any water that moves through the system. Within the larger watershed is a series of flumes, concrete measuring devices which divide the system into a series of smaller watersheds.
What we've got here is what we call a nested watershed system, where we have a measurement device here at flume 6. There'll be another one downstream at flume 2, we call it, and then the final outlet of the flume the final outlet of the watershed is at flume 1. So what we can see is how the waters and the sediment and the nutrients and all of these things are moving down through the system with time, understand where that water's going, and so forth.
Over time, the Southwest Watershed Research Center has grown, establishing research sites in other key locations around the region. A site on top of Mount Bigelow in the Catalina Mountains is at the very top of the watershed leading down into Tucson, and plays an important role in replenishing the groundwater supplies in the city.
Mount Bigelow is an important source of groundwater recharge to Tucson. So that what happens in wintertime is snow falls on the ground here. It percolates into the soil, but before it can run out eventually out of this watershed and then down into Tucson Basin and recharge that groundwater, there's a lot of things that could happen to that water along the way. So now we have the techniques to come up here and measure actually how much water the trees are using, how much water is coming into the system, how much goes into the soil and then back out. So really it's following the water up here is a really important way of estimating recharge down in the basin.
On a site at the Empire Ranch, south of Tucson, researchers are looking at watersheds on a smaller scale, using a rainfall simulator to study how range management techniques can affect water runoff and erosion.
Across the western United States, land use managers are looking for tools to evaluate the effective management on water resources and erosion. In this area, erosion can be a big problem, and there are no real good quantitative tools that exist right now to evaluate management. So our experiment is adding to these tools to give them more quantitative data to evaluate the effects of management on runoff and erosion.
Downstream from the Walnut Gulch experimental watershed, at a site along the San Pedro River channel, research is being done in close collaboration with local officials to address issues that affect the surrounding communities.
The riparian system here is a big user of water. These trees and these plants, since their roots have access to groundwater, use a great deal of water in this hot, dry environment. So there's got to be a balance between how much water the people use and how much water the system uses. And since they're getting their water from groundwater, they're pumping it, they could dry this river system out if they use too much of it. So we're trying to understand how much water do the trees use, how much water is recharged in the mountains, and how much is a safe amount of water that the people, the fort, the mines can use and still maintain the river system.
The water that comes into this system is carefully monitored through ground wells and sensors above the trees, so that researchers can track exactly how much water is coming in and going out of the system.
We measure precipitation, which is where all the water comes from. And what happens to that water is it either goes into the groundwater all the way down, or it's in the soil and evaporates out of the soil, or it goes into the water, the roots absorb it, and it gets transpired from the plants and the trees. And so basically what the ERGA does is it measures the water that goes back out into the atmosphere, which is called evapotranspiration. So that's a very important property to measure to understand the ecohydrology of this particular area.
The measurements from these experiments are translated into computer models, which can be useful decision-making tools for farmers and policymakers in dry regions all around the globe.
Another big part of our research is developing models to calculate or simulate some of these things that happen to water. So in other words, we can't instrument a watershed like Walnut Gulch and this riparian area everywhere. It's too expensive. So we use the knowledge we get to build computer models that try to capture those processes that we can then apply to someplace else.
The models that we've developed here at the Southwest Watershed Research Center have been used all over the world. One of the big uses that is taking place right now is an assessment of rangelands across the western United States. We've developed one specific computer model called the Rangeland Hydrology and Erosion Model, which estimates the soil loss from hill slopes as a function of soil type, of climate, of the vegetation that's on the surface, and the topography. That model's been applied at thousands and thousands of sites across the western United States. And the purpose of that study was really to get an idea of where in the West the most serious erosion problems were occurring.
So this year we're going to celebrate our 60th anniversary. We've been collecting rainfall, runoff, and sediment data throughout that period, and a lot of other places use our data to try to help them manage their soil and water resources. either in our models or in our publications. We tried to measure last year, and on an average day there were almost 1,500 copies of our publications downloaded. About 60% of those were from overseas, primarily India, China, Great Britain, and Canada. So we've had an impact both in the models and through our publications in how soil and water resources are managed in rural areas across the world.
Throughout its long history, the Southwest Watershed Research Center has played an important role in developing many of the tools used by researchers and policymakers today. But with an ever-increasing population and uncertainties looming about the long-term effects of climate change, the need for studying and protecting our water resources is greater than ever before.
Water is going to continue to be probably one of the most limiting resources globally. And water is used extensively for food production, it's used extensively for energy production, and of course for human and environmental well-being. So you're now getting enough people and enough uses for water that you don't have a lot of slack in the system. And so, what we do, our agency, our group, as well as many others, we're going to have to work a lot harder to ensure that we have sufficient water for people, agriculture, food, animals, and the environment.